Well, it has little chance of succeeding, at least as things stand now, with the makeup of the House and the Senate, and now an outgoing president of the United States. But President Biden still wants to make some very big changes to the Supreme Court, including limiting terms to 18 years, going after a much more rigid ethics review of how they go about doing things. And that's just for starters. It had us wondering what the late, great Justice Antonin Scalia would say about all of this, but I didn't know whether I could repeat all of his language. Chris Scalia is here. Chris, of course, his son, and an uncanny read not only of his dad, but a great appreciation for just how you treat human beings, which is a nice quality to have. So, Chris, I don't want to put words in your dad's mouth here, but I mean, this legislative interference with how the Supreme Court does its business is born of a lot of Democratic progressive rage at some of the court's decisions. Now, your dad experiences that on both sides, on the left and the right, during his long tenure. So what do you make of this?
Good morning, Neil. Thanks so much for having me on today. Well, you described it perfectly. And like you, I'm reluctant to put words in my father's mouth, but my hunch is that he would see this as a separation of powers issue, and closely to how you described it. You know, throughout his time on the Supreme Court, he often emphasized the importance of respecting the very distinctive roles that the different branches of the federal government play. And what President Biden and some of his allies in the Senate and Congress want to do is blur those boundaries. This is essentially an attempt for the other branches to not to reform the court, but to control the court. And you mentioned the term limits. Now, term limits are not a new idea. What's interesting about the specific proposal for term limits is that in addition to the term limits, the president would be able to appoint a new justice every 2 years. And with every new justice, a more senior justice would be pushed into this new category. Now, there are constitutional problems with that proposal, but you don't even need to look at the constitutional problems to recognize that this is really a power grab. This is an attempt for Biden to give presidents more power over who's on the Supreme Court. And I think a lot of that stems from just kind of left-wing frustration over President Trump's ability to get 3 justices on the court, and in the process create a conservative majority that the court has never had in my lifetime, and unfortunately something my father was never able to experience himself on the court.
Your father was there, of course, for the Supreme Court, you know, inserting itself, and not voluntarily, in the 2000 Bush-Gore race. And he then, and the court even then, doesn't like to be thrust into this. The same court, different makeup, is essentially found itself in the middle of a lot of Donald Trump-related decisions that it really doesn't welcome or embrace, but it is what it is. And this is getting to be more common. What do you think your dad would say?
Yeah, I think that's. I think you're right. And it's especially true under Chief Justice Roberts' leadership that the court is really wary of diving into these situations. I think one of the things that's really interesting about what President Biden and Senator Whitehouse are saying here is that the court needs to be more responsive to the people. But that's not really what the Supreme Court is all about, as my father said very often in his time on the court.
Very well said, Chris. Thank you. I wish we had more time, my friend. My best to your incredible family. Chris Scalia on all of that. In the meantime,